Hi, and welcome to the Hypatia Podcast. This is going to be a special for New Year's Day and our very first episode. Our special guest today is Molly Remer.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for being here. Here at the Hypatia Podcast, we're honoring words by women, words for and by women. And in Greece and Rome, the poets used to wear bay leaf wreaths. So today, Molly and I are here with our candles. We can go ahead and light our candle then. And this represents the spark of creativity that women share with each other through the spoken and written word, as well as any of our muses or guides that are with us as we create. And what kind of mist spray did you bring today?
I have Valiant Heart.
Ooh, I like that.
Which is a blend of eucalyptus and bergamot.
And is that something you can get at Brigid's Grove?
No, it's from Honey and Sage.
Honey and Sage. Oh, yes. I'll have to look them up. I haven't heard of them.
Yeah, they have a little subscription box, like a women's wellness box, and you get little treasures in the mail. So that was one of the treasures I got from them.
And this is the bay leaf Agnes Voida. Did I say her name right?
Pretty good, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, she's a poet with the Women's Red Tent group here in Rolla, and she brought some bay over for me. So I'm going to put that on the charcoal. Ooh, nice. All right. So I want to start us out with, I think is a great story with about how Whole and Holy, the a goddess devotional you put together ended up at my door.
Okay.
So during COVID, the lockdown, a lot of people were doing writing, and I do poetry normally just on and off, but during that hard time of lockdown, I was just typing away. Poetry seemed to just flow out of me, and some of that got posted on Facebook, and you were kind to say, hey, send it my way. I'm doing an anthology. And it showed up at my door on the day after solstice, and I wasn't expecting it. The mailman had a Santa hat on, and he said, Merry Christmas. I'm like, I'm not expecting anything from Amazon. So I was like, Merry Christmas. And here it was. Yay. And then later that day, there was a lovely gift package from you that you had a relative drop off that had a bunch of candles in it, and pink candles for a ceremony I was going to do. And it was just beautiful. And so I saw all the Yule poetry in this book, and I saw how you talked at the beginning about making goddess devotional a daily practice. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about, how did you decide to start putting together devotional anthologies for women?
Oh, well, so that is an interesting question, because it was really a kind of a spontaneous project, in that I've written poetry for years, and I've worked, and I have multiple other books of poetry that I've published. But in last year in the summer, I fell. And I hurt my leg. I hurt my ankle pretty badly. I tore ligaments and broke a bone in the top of my foot. And I fell doing nothing. I was literally standing on the front porch, and I just fell down. Like, I was waiting for the kids to open the door, and I fell. And, but hurt myself really badly for such a non-exciting injury. And so typically when I write poems, or like a lot of my devotional work takes place in the woods around my house. And so I had done a whole, like in 2014 to 2015, I did an experiment that I called a woods priestess experiment, where I went to the same place in the woods every day for 365 days. And I wrote down the things that I learned there, experienced there, etc. And that was really kind of my first dedicated daily devotional practice of communion, of connection, of dialoguing with the goddess, of listening to the wisdom, of learning from the woods. And I was fascinated by how much I could learn from just one same spot. And so, and I was in graduate school at seminary at the time. And so I wrote my dissertation, or I wrote my thesis for my master's in divinity based on that woods priestess experiment of sitting in the woods and learning from the woods every day. And then that became my first book of poems. And then later I wrote a dissertation about priestessing in the United States and all that kind of stuff. And I finished my doctoral degree from the same seminary. But my spiritual expression, my devotionals practice, is very connected to going out and exploring and discovering and walking and looking and learning and seeing new stuff, So I fell. And I was suddenly restricted to flat surfaces, and I couldn't go down into the woods and onto the rocks because my leg was damaged enough that I couldn't maneuver on uneven ground. And so I ended up sitting on the back deck instead, because I have a back deck that overlooks the woods, but it's flat and I can still move on it. So when I was first hurt, I actually dragged myself out there. Like I had to crawl. I crawled out to the deck and sat there on the deck, crying, looking out into the woods, I want to be in the woods, but I can't get there because I'm hurt. And so
that's how I felt during lockdown. It was just I'm stuck inside. I want to go.
Yes, I need it. So as the summer went on with this injury and I could be on the deck, I started to sit on the deck in the mornings and I would write and I would have my journals and I would be thinking about things. And I was working with Persephone at the time, and I was working on another book about devotional, basically connecting specifically with a specific goddess. And I was working on that, and I was sitting on the deck and I was thinking, where is devotion for me, or how is devotion expressed in all aspects, not just going to the woods and sitting on the rock and having magical experiences, but where is devotion in the rest of my life? Where is devotion? How is devotion expressed through me? How do I, what else do I have when these things that have been so important to me have been stripped away? So what's left when I've been stripped of what I've relied on for so many years? What do I have left? And what are the other ways to connect besides sitting in the woods and listening to the magic, And I thought, I'm going to make a handout for my Spirit Circle group on Facebook. I'm going to make a handout about devotional practice. And so I wrote down some little notes, and I thought it'll be about 6 to 10 pages long. I'll make it into a PDF, and then everybody can have this handout on devotional practice, and it'll be so interesting, and they'll like it. And I asked them.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure everyone knew. That's the Creative Spirit Circle you're talking about?
The Creative Spirit Circle, yes, on Facebook.
Oh, I love it.
Yes, that's our companion Facebook group. And so I was going to make this handout, and I asked them some questions there, how do you express devotion? And what are your favorite devotional practices? And they contributed them. And I said, I think this might turn into a little booklet instead of a handout. So do I have permission to use the things you've contributed to about devotional practice to this little booklet? And they said yes. And anyway, so it sort of just happened accidentally. Like I said, I accidentally wrote a devotional. So that was the first one. That was the goddess devotional.
And I just realized these mandalas on the books are similar to the ones you encourage the women to make at the red tents, aren't they?
Yes. So I make them. They make the wooden
beautiful.
And the goddesses.
And it seems like something that was inspired by your year-long travels out to your spot. Watching the decoration of nature and how the leaves change and how different animals come through. I just love
absolutely.
these.
Yes, that's that, and they're very connected to like what's happening right then. You know, I can't go out. I was making one for a different book cover, and I was like intentionally thinking like, oh, I want to make sure I have some, you know, red, and I want to make sure I have some whatever. And it's like I have to get what there is. I have to receive what there is. So if there's fallen leaves and there's feathers and there's acorns, like that's what I have to work with. Like, oh, well, that I wish there was yellow flowers and roses. This isn't the time of year for them. So they really are an experience of like what's actually there and, you know, what's right in front of me.
And I love how it's so tactile too, the crunch of the leaves or the softness of the petals or like the smooth part of the acorn or the spiky part on top.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes, definitely. So the first devotional was just like an accident. Like I was like, oh, look, I wrote a tiny book accidentally. There it is. And then as soon as I finished it, people still had other things to contribute. And so I knew there was a volume 2 out there. And so it was intentional. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm going to actually ask for contributions. I set up a contribution form. I developed some other questions. I posted those in the Facebook group. And then I continued to work with like devotion and devotional concepts like throughout the year, kind of alert for knowing that this book was waiting. You know, it was kind of like waiting to be there. But the first one was definitely like, surprise. The second one was much more like, oh, like I can go further with this. And so it's interesting to me that the first one came from essentially being injured and restricted in what I was normally able to do. And it ended up opening a different door for me in a different type or level of experiencing and a recognition of those different ways that devotion is expressed through us. You know, I say like our lives are living prayers, you know, and our feet are always on temple ground and everywhere is the Holy Land. And so we don't need to feel like we have to pilgrimage off to sacred sites. We can open the back door and see what's out there.
And I know one thing that daily practice has really helped me with is gratitude.
Yes.
Gratitude. And I struggle with depression and anxiety. So taking time every day to do chants or have some kind of gratitude really helps me feel grounded. And I have to say, in Whole and Holy, you mentioned at one point to each day, wake up and bless yourself and then touch the ground. And lately, my devotion when I wake up in the morning has just been, I'm alive.
Yeah.
Touch myself and touch the ground because I'm so thankful to still be here at the end of 2020, as I'm sure a lot of us are. And it's as Priestess Yesha with the Mount Shasta Goddess Temple said, it's going to take a few years, I think, for us to really absorb and process everything that's happened. And you know, I'm so grateful for everything that women like her and you offer freely to the community. Part of that matriarchal gift economy of the ancient future. You know, that's kind of how I got, you know, this pink quartz from you. Thank you. I'm putting my wish in this for the Hypatia podcast to go well. And yeah, I'm just so grateful for everything women have been putting out to help each other through this. So with the new year coming up, you have a program coming up, don't you? The 30 Days of Goddess Devotional.
Yes.
Which is so different than just setting a what would you call it, a New Year's resolution. You know, everyone starts getting stressed out. What's my New Year's resolution going to be? And we set ourselves up for failure, I think, if we set our goals towards something our heart's not really in. But I think a daily practice to honor being alive and the presence of divinity is something that we can really look forward to each day, that we can put our hearts into.
Yes, and one of the things that I was going to say is some of my best projects and my most exciting things I never dreamed of at the beginning of the year. You know, if I was restricting myself to only what I thought I'd said I wanted to do at the beginning of the year, like I would never have written a book, or I would never have, like, things just there's a type of a following of the inspiration, or being open to the inspiration as it comes.
The
And it's
magical
not to say,
synchronicity.
yes, and it's not to say that planning doesn't matter, or that setting intentions doesn't matter, or that having some kind of broad shape for what you like the year to look like, that those things matter too. But being open to what drops in is really exciting and fulfilling, and doesn't and you're not locked in to, like, well, I wrote down on January 1st that I was going to do XYZ. And the 30 days of goddess practice was another one of those very spontaneous things, because it was so I finished the whole and holy book, and I really wanted to get it out before the end of the year to have for people, for that kind of encouragement and inspiration, or like a comfort, so to speak, almost through what's been a tough year. And I don't even remember, like, I woke up in the morning. I often get a lot of inspiration in the morning. I woke up in the morning and I was like, I'm going to make this 30 days of goddess practice, this devotional practice, and it will accompany. Nobody has to buy the book. Like, the practice is standalone. Like, it stands alone as a standalone experience. And so I woke up and I'm like, I'm going to make this little prayer book that people can print out and write their own prayers, one for every day. And I did this in the summer. I called it 30 days, 30 prayers, where I was like, I'm going to write a new prayer of devotion to Persephone every day for 30 days. And I did that. That was like in the summer. And this project is kind of like, comes from that same kind of idea. Like, what happens if you write 30 prayers in 30 days, or if you offer 30 prayers in 30 days? And so I was like, I'm going to create this little journal for people to write and record their own experiences. And then I thought, oh, I'll have a prompt for every day. And like immediately, like, I got like 30 prompts, like, boop, like fell into my hands. I was scribbling them down. And then I went out to the woods, because I can get out there now. I'm not hurt anymore, so I can make it out to the woods. So I went out to the woods and I sat on the rock, and I made a whole audio about how to engage with this 30 days practice. And then, like, I finished the little journal accompaniment. And then in the next couple of days, I made 38 videos to go with it, like all in one day. They're very short videos. And I was like, oh my gosh, where did this come from? Because first of all, it's a very busy time of year for us retail, because we have an online business. And so people are ordering, and suddenly I'm like developing 30 days of
June
yes.
and Christmas and
Yeah,
Christmas.
it's really extreme. And so, but this 30 days of goddess, it was like, I felt like it was fully formed, and it went like, bloop, and I caught it.
Sometimes our personal strand on the web crosses with something bigger, I think. We come to that conjunction, and it feels a lot like automatic writing or channeling in a way, when that inspiration hits.
Yes, and that's what I think we're going to talk a little bit about Womanrunes, but when Shekhina Mountainwater, she received the Womanrunes, she said she felt like she experienced a goddess lightning strike of inspiration. Like, it went boom, and then like the symbols came from her. And I know that kind of feeling, like that lightning strike of inspiration. But so the 30 days practice I'm just offering that for free via my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Brigid'sGrove. And it's just so the audio, the downloads to make the little prayer book. There's videos for how to make a prayer book for yourself. And then there's an audio like walkthrough of what the practice is and how to work with it. And then there's the little videos that go with every day for the prompts. But I was going to show you the little booklet.
So I love it.
So this is, so it's a little daily prayer book. And then I have been working a little bit in mine in advance with my little images and stuff. But there's place to work every day for 30 days. And it does not have to be January. Like, it can be March if you want to, it can be June if you want to. It's a standalone practice, and it can be done at any time. It can be dedicated to a specific goddess. It can be a different goddess every single day. It can be just your great broad sense of divinity, your sense of the sacred. It doesn't have to be specifically oriented to a specific spiritual path. It's a very broad practice, but there's also space to work with your word of the year and with runes, moon phase, and mood. And so it's basically a daily practice of devotion to guide you through the month. But you could start it on the 15th of the month and run it to the 15th of the next month. There's kind of no rules about it. This is just designed to support you in creating and nurturing a daily devotional practice for yourself in whatever way feels like it's most nourishing and nurturing to you and your wholeness. And so I just had tons of fun. Like I created this and it was so much fun. And I made little videos. I have 2 different methods. So I have a little one too. I have a smaller one, and
so
I like
those
to do
pages are able for people to print and then customize.
Yes, exactly. And so I like to put, like, I have a little pocket in the front, and I like to put stuff in the little pocket, and I have videos about how to sew the binding and how to make one for yourself. But I also have a little video about just stapling one together. Like, there is no shame in a staple game. Like, you don't have to be sewing anything. You don't have to be sewing things fancy. You can use just a regular notebook, but I've got the little prompts that go with every day and stuff like that. So that's all prepared and ready, and that comes out January 1st. But like I said, completely can be used at any point in any month of any year. Like it's
Well, I would love to drop that link into the Hypatia literary group on the Goddess Temple app.
Yes.
So people might be interested in doing that, making their own little devotional book. Well, I say little, but it has big things that can be included for people with that.
That's right. And I really hope it'll nourish that sensation daily connection for people without having to be big and fancy and elaborate. I think one of my passions is reminding people about small magic. Like I mentioned, the everyday magic instead. I'm actually wearing a everyday magic t-shirt right now, but
yes, your everyday magic jewelry and
yes, like I'm really, but the small magic, like the small pieces of magic that aren't necessarily the moments of flash and fire, but the things that are that nourish you on a daily basis. And usually something that nourishes you on a daily basis does need to be pretty small, because people's lives are complex and they're busy and they have lots of things. And so it needs to be, I joke about, your life needs to be small enough to hold you, but your practices need to be small enough to hold you too. So they don't become an endless to-do list of how to be an amazing spiritual person. And if you don't do all these amazing spiritual things, then you failed and you didn't have the greatest full moon ritual and you didn't remember to do your devotions and you didn't, light the right color candle, etc. If it's small enough to hold you, then it replenishes you and doesn't become just another item on your to-do list. So
yes, and those anxieties of not getting our to-do list done, those feelings of guilt, shame, that's what leads us to turning away, I think, from our connection to spirit.
Yes, so and that's one of the things I say in the 30 days practice. That's one of the things that I pointed out is, like, if you miss a day, oh well, like start again the next day. Like you're not locked in, like it's the 6th day and I didn't do the 6th thing. If it's the 7th day, it's the 7th day. Like keep going. And you don't have to feel behind. There's no such thing as being behind or having failed.
One thing I love about your writing, how you write your poems and prayers, is it brings across that simplicity. You don't use how should I say it's not very wordy, they're short, but they're so impactful. And it reminds me of actually you sitting on your land looking out at the beauty of the world and then capturing what's succulent, what's important.
Yeah. And that's what I do feel that way. It's not about, and I just actually made a different audio earlier today that was about like the ceremonies the world creates for us. I think sometimes we feel like this pressure to create ritual or ceremony or do things that are special. And we forget that sometimes just walking outside, you can see the ceremony that's already in place, that's already happening with or without you, like whether or not you're participating or not, the ceremony is already there and you can step into it and take part in it. It's about stepping into what there is instead of rushing on to the next thing or trying to transcend.
Being aware in the moment, seeing the miracle in the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Body prayer.
I wanted to ask you, is there a name for the land you live on? Did it tell you if it has a name, or did you come up with a name for it?
We just our business's name is Brigid's Grove, and we often refer to the land as Brigid's Grove too, like the whole place is Brigid's Grove. But it also had in the past, we've called it Stonehaven because of all there's big rocks all around, and it felt like
you're in the Ozarks.
Yeah, and it felt like a place of refuge and that kind of thing. It has previously been called Stonehaven, but in general, we kind of think of the land that we live on and around us as kind of the whole thing is Brigid's Grove in its own way.
So you're there with your husband, Mark.
Yes.
And how many kids do you have?
We have 4. Mm-hmm. We have 4 kids. The oldest is 17 and the youngest is 6.
Oh, lovely. So they get to grow up out there in the woods and Brigid's Grove and everything. That's wonderful. Let's see. Oh, I was hoping you would share something from Whole and Holy.
Yes, I will.
Read to us, because you're never too old to have someone read to you, I say.
Sure. I will happily do that. So the one I had picked, I thought about just opening it randomly, because sometimes in a way you can almost use this as a daily
bibliomancy.
Yes, like kind of like a daily oracle. You just open up and see what you get.
That's my favorite.
Yes, I do pick that too, but I actually picked one intentionally because of the themes and because of the start of the new year and because of the year that we've been through. Like this was one that I wrote earlier when the pandemic was kind of gathering steam. I think some of us have settled into almost a type of resignation about like, oh, this is what life's like now. But
yes, you always have a mask with you. And
yes, this one was written when there was and it's not that there still isn't uncertainty, but we've adapted in a way that maybe we didn't know we were going to have to adapt, or that we were going to be called upon to adapt. So anyway, this is a little bit of the longer one called Remember, and it's on page 259. So, when the whole world feels creased with uncertainty and shadows of worry and fear fall across your skin, your edges wobbly, your steps unsure, step outside onto this wide earth whenever you can, wherever you are, even into a memory. Remember there is air. Remember there is breath. Remember there is solid earth beneath your feet. Tip your face to the sky. If there are raindrops or sunbeams, let them kiss your face. If there is thunder, listen. If there is moonlight, drink it. If there is sunshine, bless it. Feel your heart beat in your wrist, in your chest, in the soles of your feet. Notice there are birds. Look for a tree. Trust the grass. Draw patience from a stone and courage from the way branches reach toward the sky. Open your hands and soften your shoulders. Remember you are held firmly on a spinning world. Remember there is support beneath you. Soft breath in your belly, sweet air in your throat. The planet exhales, and so too do you.
I love that, because whenever there's so much uncertainty and I or any of us get really scared, our tongue goes to the roof of our mouth, our shoulders get clenched, and we're taking these tiny little breaths and just to exhale and be there and just breathe sometimes can be the most inspiring, magical act we can do, I think.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks for asking.
Well, let's see. I'm trying to think what I wanted to ask you next. Oh, I know. Let's talk a little bit about Womanrunes and Shekhina Mountainwater, who is known as one of the godmothers of the goddess movement here in the United States. How did you find out about her and her work?
Well, I was it was 2012, I believe, and I had ordered some back issues of Sage Woman magazine. And I had a subscription to the current Sage Woman magazine, but I'd ordered like a bundle of back issues from past years, and one of the ones I received was from 1988, and in it there was a very brief article written by Shekhina about Womanrunes, and there was I believe the article was about creating a bind rune or a rune symbol using Womanrunes. And so I read the little article. I think it was only one page, maybe 2 pages. It was very brief, but I saw these little symbols and I was like, oh my gosh, like, what is this? You know,
they're like little lightning strikes, like the way she explains.
Yes, I felt like they just reached right off the page and were like, bing, at me. And so I did a little bit more research and I Googled for information about them. I posted, and I think I was in some Yahoo groups still at the time, back when Yahoo groups were a thing. I posted like asking questions, like, does anybody know more about this? I found some handouts that were on a really almost broken website that was, you know, like a GeoCities kind of website that was kind of
GeoCities.
Yeah, it was
all this sparkles and mini.
Yeah, exactly. So I traced some little threads and I found some little pieces of information, and then I ordered Ariadne's thread, which is her classic, workbook of Goddess Magic. I love that book. It's wonderful, and I ordered that. I found a used copy of it that was not exorbitantly priced. Sometimes they're really exorbitantly priced, but I ordered that, and there's a little bit. Same thing. It's like 3 or 4 pages in Ariadne's thread are about Womanrunes, because she was still working on developing her system for them, and then she didn't necessarily like finish. I think she had more plans for them than she was able to finish. Mm-hmm. And so I started using them at that time. Like I made a set out of clay, and I would carry them around, and I would take them down to the woods, and I worked on them with I had a different women's spirituality study group at the time, and a women's retreat group. And so we made prayer flags with Womanrunes, and we wrote our names, and we made sets, and we just started using them because they're this powerful type of language of divinity, really. Like there's a language to them, and a simplicity and a direct kind of communion. I let people joke and say Womanrunes are cheeky, because they often wink at you or play little jokes on you often. So you're thinking maybe you're thinking I just don't know what to do. Why is life always such a mystery? And then you pick your rune and it's the mystery. And you're like, thanks.
Yes. What is it? The shovel? There's work.
There's the tool, the rune of labor. Yeah.
And so get at it.
Exactly right. You got to do the work. So they're very direct. They're very direct and simple, and often, like I said, kind of cheeky. They're kind of gonna, and maybe a little bit chastise you a little bit, but in a loving way. There's a loving type of.
Shekhina, that's exactly like Shekhina too. I was lucky enough to study with her when I lived in Santa Cruz. I got involved with a woman's group and online, and this was 2004 or 5 maybe, when the internet was still pretty new, so it was all chat text only. Mm-hmm. And she would take a group of us and we would do a ritual online, traveling in what she called the moon boat.
Yes.
Yes. Uh-huh. And we'd go to Avalon and do the whole ceremony. Well, then I found out, she's just 2 blocks from me. And so I went to her home, and she had a temple room just covered in red tapestries, red satin everywhere, So when I found out that there was such a thing as the red tent temple and red tent group, I'm like, oh, hey.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And her first lesson for me was to write out all the woman's runes on cards and have my own deck. I forgot to have it right in front of me, but here, I'll grab it. It won't take a moment. And then I love your interpretation of the deck. They're actually on printed cards, and it comes with a book, right? And
yes.
Did Mark write the book? Is that right?
No,
or both of you? Oh, you did.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He did the art for the cards. He did the
Oh,
art for the cover and the art for the cards, but no, the writing is me. He doesn't
you did a really good job, both of you.
right, writing's
Um,
not his thing. That's my thing.
so yeah, it's like it's very simple, the runes, and she would actually use them to write out her spells. She used them like
Yes,
an alphabet
absolutely.
too.
Yeah, and
I
that
have
was that first article that I read. That's what it was about writing, using them to write, and
right.
maybe because I am a writer is why they spoke to me so cleanly and clearly. And I had missed that part of the story, is that I started to take my clay ones out to the woods. In that same spot in the woods, I thank that spot in the woods for basically everything.
Oh, is that what helped you come
And
up with the
I
booklet?
sat there with the rune, and then I
Yeah.
would let the rune kind of speak to me, and I just would record what I heard on my phone in the voice memos. So I would hold the clay rune, and then I would listen, and then I would record what I heard from it. And then later I typed up those audios, and that's what became the Womanrunes book, was the I typed up essentially what I heard about those runes while I was in the woods with them. And,
They do
and then
speak like that.
later I wrote,
She's the mystery
yes,
one.
exactly. Yeah.
And so then you got those messages from the runes, and then how were you able to reach out to her to Shekhina's what do you
Estate.
call it?
Her
Estate. Yes, thank
Yes.
you.
Well, what was interesting is, similarly to various other projects that I've talked about today, I originally had sent, so I found a different website that had like a contact us kind of email address at the bottom that was maybe or maybe not would still work. And so I emailed that address and said, I'm going to be giving a presentation at a conference, which I was going to Gaia Goddess Gathering in Kansas, and I was going to teach the people there how to make a little rune set with clay. And I said, I'm going to make a booklet, like a handout or booklet to go with this presentation. Can I have permission to do that? Because I'm writing these interpretations that go with the runes. And they said, yes. I did hear back from the email address, and they said yes. And so what happened was, though it didn't turn into a handout, I have a thing about thinking I'm going to make a handout and then
And
accidentally
it
write a
becomes
book.
like a book or a
Yes, and I
series.
accidentally wrote a book. So I accidentally wrote the whole book instead of a handout. And so then they reached back out to me and said, hey, that's not a handout. That's like a real book. So we need to talk more about this. Like there needs to be a more clear agreement for
Mhm.
to use these, because this is totally different than a handout. And so obviously, yes, it was totally different than a handout. And so we created a contract. Her daughter drew up a contract for us to work with, and we came up with a publishing agreement for me to publish the book. And then we have a royalties agreement where I do a payment to her estate every year, which goes to her grandchildren. The estate is benefits her grandchildren. And so her intellectual property, which was the original creation of the symbols, then continues to benefit her family's legacy, and continues to carry it on. So we came up with an agreement that allowed me to include, because I expanded the ways of using these, or the interpretations, or like what they mean, like quite a bit beyond what was originally created for them. Like I said, I don't think she got a chance to finish maybe what she was going to do with them. And
There's just a small section, really, a chapter or
right,
so in Ariadne's
right.
threads.
And so the development of them was something, anyway, so I developed and expanded a lot to go with them. And so our agreement together was that I could do that. And then the estate still benefits from that ongoing use and development as something that she created.
I think that's wonderful, and it's so interesting how when I moved back to Missouri, I ended up in your area, and
Oh,
you
that's
had
funny.
been connected to Shekhina in some way, and I was connected by being her student for a
Yeah,
while.
yeah, yeah. And
And
I hadn't, by the time I had studied goddess spirituality, and for a year, I mean, I date it back to 2001 probably is when I read my first book that dug into goddess traditions and those kinds of things. But I didn't encounter Shekhina specifically until 2012 with that article, and that she'd already passed away before I even got to that piece of the women's spirituality puzzle, or the as a foremother of the movement.
So along with Ariadne's Fred, what other books have inspired you to get onto a goddess path? Is there one in particular that really sort of, I guess, brought you into the awareness of there's a goddess?
Yes, I read, so in 2001, I believe, it may have been 2000, but it doesn't matter that much. So 2000 or 2001, I had a friend who was taking a women's studies class in college. And in that women's studies class, she had read When God Was a Woman by Merlin Stone, and she had read The Chalice and the Blade by Riane Eisler. And she had read them in her women's studies class. And we had been talking, that friend and I had been talking about, I was never Christian, and I was never traditionally religious person. And so we had been the friend and I had been talking for some time about kind of maybe like some pagan kind of ideas. We'd sort of been tossing around like this goddess kind of concept, but it's really kind of fuzzy and indistinct, and just kind of like, maybe there's something out there. Maybe there's something out there like outside of a Judeo-Christian framework, like maybe, but it was very kind of fuzzy a little bit. And so she took this women's studies class, and then she lent me those books, When God Was a Woman and The Chalice and the Blade. And I read them and was like, oh.
I read When God Was a Woman also in a women's spirituality class when I was working on my degree at Southeast Missouri State University in Cape Girardeau, and that along with the spiral dance is what,
yes,
by Starhawk, is what really, I was like, what? There's religions outside of Christianity? Because I was raised by a family that had just like this major lineage of male preachers, from different branches of Christianity. But that you go to church on Sunday because our family is representing God to all these people. And so when I went to college and started learning about all these different religions, I got so excited. I was like, oh. And I felt so drawn to Druidry because I had spent so much time on my grandpa's back 40, following the deer trails and watching the seasons change. And to me, that was more inspiring than church.
Right.
was sitting still in the pew,
Right. I grew up outside of an organized religious framework, but in Missouri, in this kind of Bible Belt Midwest. So and I was homeschooled as a kid too. And most of my peers were very fundamentalist Christian. And I was definitely like an outlier, or the non-religious one. And I come from a generations, I joke like, at least like fourth generation kind of non-religious person. Like my great grandparents didn't go to church, my grandparents didn't go to church, my parents didn't go to church, and I didn't go to church. So that's like 4 generations of non-church going people. And so
yes, because you come across so spiritual in the songs you do at the things you put together for Red Tent and all your.
So it's interesting to have this be like such a passion for me, when I'm like, that's I'm gonna rebel.
Now you're making like these tiny goddesses. I think I see some on back.
Yeah. I have my little tiny goddesses.
I love them.
Oh, like right. So like that's my whole life is this devotion to this path, but outside of the Judeo-Christian framework. And I would say like I've had this broad sense, and I'm like, I went to my first women's circle because my mom went to a women's circle, and we did mother blessing ceremonies for people and things like that. So it wasn't that I had no exposure to like an alternative spiritual framework, but it tended to be focused around pregnancy and birthing, and then that was kind of the focus of that particular time period. So she was but definitely not traditionally religious at all. And And that influenced me, but this sensation of having to be, as I say, like, the goddess kind of dancing on the edges of my consciousness or my awareness for quite a few years. And so reading those books almost just started to give me language for something that I'd already perceived, and that I felt like it helped me see that there's an alternative. It's not religious or Christian, and those are your only two choices.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of other possibilities within them, and it's also not atheist or Christian. And so I find sometimes when I encounter people who are atheist, a lot of times what they are arguing against, specifically this Judeo-Christian concept of God as masculine, as male, as the white beard in the sky kind of thing. And so maybe conflict, exactly. It's like, I'm not even in there. Like, so the conflict between this perspective and that perspective, and like, I'm going to disprove this, and I'm going to stand up for faith here, and I'm going to disprove this. I'm like, well, I'm just going to be over here with my goddesses instead. Right, my bones sitting on my rock, and that's what I'm going to be doing.
I have trouble with those kinds of intellectual arguments with
there's a lot of
versus spirituality of some kind, because how do you explain all the little synchronicities that the goddess whispering to you?
Yeah.
Because I remember in the 90s walking into Hastings, that used to be a big bookstore. I don't know if there's still
there was one we lived in Jefferson City, and there was one there. I used to like to go.
And I found Sage Woman magazine, and it was like, there she was going, just pick it up.
Yeah. Well, yes. And I went
that's
to
how you found Shekhina's article, and you've been published in Sage Woman too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, multiple times. Yeah, that's I blog for Sage Woman. Their blogs online. I have a blog at Sage Woman too, that I've written since, like, I don't know, 2014 or something, but maybe 2015. I've written there, but and I do, like I was going to say, I went to when my first son was a baby, I had him in my little pouch on my chest, and that was in 2003. And I went into the basement of this little pieceworks shop in Columbia, and I was down there in their kind of anarchist, witchy kind of literature, and I found a moon date book there in 2003 and bought that. Yes, and I bought that date book when he was just a baby.
That date book introduced you to the idea that a calendar can be circular. Because Shekhina was always saying, think outside the box. You don't realize how much patriarchy has put you in a box.
Yeah, and it felt very like kind of secret and forbidden almost, to be like, I'm gonna go ahead and get this calendar that's all about women's wisdom and magic and all this kind of stuff. And it was a little bit, there's like a different than I said before or written before, that there's like some different threads, and the goddess-centered and women's spirituality kind of thread is related to, but distinct from, paganism and Wicca in their lineage, and the books and practices that are kind of Wiccan inspired maybe don't always speak to that goddess perspective in the way that the writings of people like Shekhina, Mountainwater speak to. Like, there's a different flavor. So it's not that they're incompatible, but there's another thread in the lineage. Carol Christ is another writer who's been really influential to me. Barbara Ardinger, who wrote a women's book of rituals and ceremonies, a women's book of rituals and celebrations. Those books were really powerful to me. And there's like
Women Who Run with the Wolves.
There's a different thread there that's not the same as like the Gardner and Buckland and the kind of writers that influenced a lot of Wiccan thought, that were kind of drawing on threads from maybe British like mystics and kind of esoteric or occult philosophy from Britain.
They were pulling a lot from the late Victorian era, and then a lot of masculine magic.
And it's a lot of and there's something, so there's something there, and I'm not meaning to like dismiss or discount the influence of those teachings on people, but there was something there that didn't speak to my own like embodied experience or my own lived experience. There was something that was like, didn't connect. So I spent those years kind of thinking like, there's something out there, there's something different. But then I would read books that had that kind of flavor to them. I'd be like, nah, there's something's missing for me. And so it was when I found Sage One Magazine and We Moon and things that come from that really solid, like matriarchal, matristic, goddess
They're
oriented.
breaking out of the box, even the magical system box.
Hallie Englehart was another one that I read at the time. Who there's something, they're speaking to something different. Like there's just a difference there, and it's not to say anything else is wrong or anything. Just that there's different threads and different flavors. And
I like how you say that, different threads, but it's the giant web, but sometimes we find that vibration that's going, like the goddess is a spider going, and we're like, oh, let's follow that little inspiration
over here. Yeah.
Well, Molly, I've really enjoyed our time. Thank you so much for coming on to the Hypatia podcast. As we wrap up, I'd like us to do a card pull, I think, for the year. Okay, and I'd like you to read the interpretation out of the book that you, Mark, put together. So why don't you go ahead, you can go first and pull a card, then I'll pull a card. What, you want me to go first?
I'm just chuckling.
I'm just chuckling. Okay. You had this delightful smile on your face, like, like, what's gonna happen?
The sun, the rune of healing.
Yes. Oh, we need that for 2021.
That's what I was gonna say. Isn't that what we all need?
Yes, and I love how the cards are so simple. So, there's not a whole lot of imagery kind of interfering with the message. Mm-hmm. And there's also read the little bottom of the card too. I like how there's like a little bit of information about it, and then the deeper meaning.
Yeah, the keyword. So this is the rune of healing, rejuvenation, recreation, play, and radiance. So so that's what the sun is. And I feel like a lot of times you get a very, and that's what I mean. The Womanrunes are very simple and direct. It's like, what do we need going into this year? We need healing. Play. Like you almost kind of like, okay, thanks. You're right. That is what we need. And
she would be so like that too, because every time she wore these flowy outfits, always had her hair flowing, and she'd be like, oh.
Right.
So I'm really bringing a lot of joy and play with her music and dancing.
Yeah. So the sun, there's also a sun and moon rune, which is about laughter and as well. So they kind of blend together for me sometimes. But I think that it's not like the healing from this rune, or the healing suggested is partially about like accepting and integrating and changing and growing. So it's not about necessarily getting over something or getting past something. It's about kind of integrating the difficult changes and the things that you've been through, like incorporating them into you. And so anyway,
like a plant absorbing the sunlight.
Exactly. Yes. And also, and one of the things that I think that's important to realize with a rune like this is that healing is possible and available, like kind of all around us. And I like to say that there's support, there's always support beneath your feet to draw upon. And there is, healing is available in many forms and shapes. It doesn't have to just be physical healing. It can be spiritual healing, emotional healing, relational healing with relationships, interpersonal relationships. There is, a lot of healing, and healing is also very possible through play and laughter and celebration and delight. Like that brings healing to us as well. So where do you need healing? What do you need to, what is calling out to you to be healed? But also, where might you play? Where might you let your radiance shine out in a way that might bring healing to others too, healing and joy to the lives of other people. So,
right. Take time to sit with your feelings. and pull on that, as they say in the red thread, ask
Yes.
for help when you need it,
Yes, absolutely.
so that you can eventually return to play. I like
Yes.
that.
And I'm just going to say, so that was just I'm going to say one little quick snippet. The section from the book is probably too long, but I did want to
Sure.
say that this rune reminds, so this is just a snippet from the book about it, this rune reminds us to play and to take time out. So what do you most enjoy doing? And this connects back to our daily practices and our devotion, is make sure these things are not just reserved for someday or for special occasions, but that they are a regular, enriching part of your regular life, like a nourishing part of your regular life. So, the sun rises every day, the sun comes up every day. And so make sure that you are taking time in every day for the things that nourish you and help restore and heal you, because it's not something that happened. It's not something that we want to be reserved only for special or in a big flash, but rather something that's a daily, steady, quiet, restorative part of your life and being who you are.
Absolutely. That you put that so well, and that is such a beautiful card for us to get for the year.
It really is. I'm happy to see that one. Yeah, I picked it. I was like, oh boy, like
yay! Oh, right now I'm anxious to see what I pull for us for the year ahead. As you do it till one kind of pop. Oh wait, that one just pulled. Oh, now this is interesting. It's the Cauldron of Reflection.
Yes.
Tell us about that one.
Favorites. That's one of my favorites. And so the Cauldron of Reflection is really in some ways like a rune of duality too, because it's both containing but also steeping, like you're letting things blend and meld and marinate.
Ooh, like a good stew.
Yeah, so that you can dish up something powerful, right? So you're containing it, and I say like you're steeping in yourself, kind of you're steeping in your own wisdom, savoring your own flavor, like melding your inspiration and your ideas and your things together so that you can dish out something powerful, that you can share something nourishing and rich and hearty and full, because you've allowed it to steep and brew and grow. So for me, the Cauldron of Reflection always invites you inward. What are you steeping? What are you savoring? What are you discovering? What are you blending to your pot? Like what cauldron is kind of you? What are you mixing in? What are you tasting? What are you discovering? And then what are you preparing? What are you letting meld and ripen?
This reminds me of my writing process, actually.
Yeah. Like what kind of like magic are you brewing up, and then how will it come forth? So there's multiple cauldron runes in the Womanrunes system.
Oh yes, it's actually the one right under it was Cauldron of Alchemy was right under it.
Yes, the cauldron. So I love the cauldron runes. I have my little goddess necklace. That's one of the ones we make, but then I have a teeny tiny cauldron. Do you see? I have a teeny tiny cauldron that hangs on the chain with her.
Now I know what I'm getting myself for the next payday.
Yes, because it always reminds me of that, like steeping in your own wisdom, but not because you're going to hold it all inside, because you're preparing something juicy and delicious to share with other people.
I love Carradwin as a goddess. That whole idea of.
I have my other little. She's got a cauldron too.
Oh, lovely.
I'm all about the cauldrons.
Well, Molly, thank you so much for joining the podcast, and this will be available everybody on New Year's Day. So happy New Year, everybody. And if anyone's interested, you can go to brigidsgrove.com and participate in the Creative Spirit Circle to get involved with the 30 Days of Goddess offerings.
Yes, and the 30 Days of Goddess is actually going to be run via my Patreon. So it's patreon.com. Yes, it's patreon.com/BrigidsGrove. And if you get on there like right around January 1st, it should be the first thing you see under the posts section. If you're listening to this in the future, you may have to dig around a little bit to find it, but it's hashtag 30 Days of Goddess. So you should be able to click on the little tag and follow it from there, but it's patreon.com/Brigid's Grove. And that's where the 30 Days of Goddess practice is like hosted, and where that's where the downloads are for the prayer book and the audio to listen to and stuff like that is all there.
Wonderful.
On January 1st, yes.
January 1st, 2021.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you next month. And Trista Hendren is going to be our guest from Grow God Books.
Yay, wonderful. Thank you.
You are welcome. Bye.
Bye.